What the Tech is sponsored by Win Connections, October 29th to November 1st at the Bellagio in Las Vegas. Save $100 by using promo code TECH100 when registering. For more information, go to winconnections.com. Audible.com, the internet's leading provider of audiobooks, with more than 100,000 downloadable titles across all types of literature. For a free audiobook of your choice, go to audiblepodcast.com/Andrew. And by Stitcher Radio. Listen on the go via the Stitcher mobile app. For more information, go to stitcher.com/GFQ.
What the Tech?
Hey everybody, welcome to What the Tech. I'm Andrew Zarian, and I'm joined by Paul Thurrott from a undisclosed location. He's on a secret mission.
Right.
How you doing, Paul?
I'm doing pretty well, other than the 20-minute spaz attack when the wired connection wouldn't work here.
For people watching live, we're a little late to start the show, about a half hour, but we're here. And I'm not going to continue reading the manual for iTunes for Windows.
What was the point of that?
Just to irritate the audience and get them to leave. Because that's how I try to make friends with my audience.
I'm impressed that there is a manual for iTunes.
Yeah, there is. It's a whole, like, well, in version 9, 64-bit support got added.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It's a lot of fun. But a lot going on. You've been busy.
Yep.
Your book is out. We're getting closer to the launch dates for all the Microsoft products that we're all waiting for. Windows RT, Windows Phone 8, Windows 8, and all the devices that come along with it. So I kind of wanted to review some of these devices since we've gotten closer to it and add any information that we've learned over the last couple of weeks. And there's still many things that we don't know, and we're a good 24 days away.
I know.
A little scary when you think of it in that sense.
There's more stuff happening, too. Did you notice, HTC just announced a new version of the One X?
I did.
That, looks pretty interesting. Obviously, Apple's probably going to release an iPad Mini someday in the next couple of weeks.
Did you see the rumors that they're saying that it may not have 4G and it may only be 3G?
No, that doesn't make sense to me. I could almost picture them making it without any cellular, because that's sort of how the competition in that space is currently working. But no, why would you?
See, I see the iPad Mini to kind of well, we'll talk about it now.
Okay.
I see the iPad Mini as a threat to the iPad. I feel like it's going to compete with itself because the pricing is not going to be dirt cheap, and it's going to be this $100 or $150 to $200 difference between the two devices, and people are going to go for the cheaper one and not the iPad, not the the
but you know what?
iPad.
I still think that makes sense for Apple, because they're going to be ceding market share to these really, really low end, really low cost Android devices, right? The Kindle Fire HD, the upcoming Nook tablet, even the Nexus 7 are all basically $200 and under, or $200.
But they're not going to be $200 and under. That's the problem.
What's not going to be?
The iPad Mini or whatever they call it.
But you know what? The iPad Mini doesn't have to be $200. It's a question of degree. I mean, obviously, it has to be somewhere between. It's going to be somewhere between $200 and, I guess, $400 if you look at the cost of the iPad 2, which they still sell. I think that Apple can sell a device that costs more and justify it on the strength of the ecosystem and availability of apps that they have, that there is a premium that you pay for these products and that people eagerly do so, and that I think it's okay. I mean, everyone will have to mention in a review that this product does cost whatever amount of dollars more than the next thing down, but it's still an iPad. It's going to be super thin and light. It's going to get awesome battery life. That it's going to run all of those apps that are out there. iPhone apps might make more sense on that small screen, right? In ways that they don't necessarily make sense on the big screen of the regular iPad. So,
well, the other thing that Apple is facing is that they're going to have to go 16:9 on all their devices.
Yeah.
So the iPad is going to end up growing in size in a weird way.
In tallness. It's like a
Yeah.
teenager going through a growth spurt.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
they're
I
going to
hope
grow this
so.
way.
Yeah, I always thought that the 4:3 aspect ratio was a little weird on the original iPad, and obviously in all iPads. Although now that it's been in the market for a while, you kind of get used to it.
You do get
Um,
used to it, and then when you pick up, one of the Acer,
it
11
seems
point,
tall and weird. Yeah.
it's very uncomfortable to use. You really can't maneuver it
But
around.
on the flip side, though, when you go down to the smaller devices, if you look at the Nexus 7, is a great example of this because the device itself kind of mirrors the aspect ratio of the screen. It at that size, for whatever reason, that tallness is not really a problem. It kind of emulates a paperback book almost. It's a little taller, obviously, but it's got that kind of a paperback book is not 4:3 either, if you think about it. So it being a little taller is not really weird. And in fact, the Kindle Fire HD, which is a good device, I think one of the weirdest things about it is that even though that screen is tall and thin and is basically 16:9, the device itself is 4:3. It's got like a really big bezel on it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of odd. I mean, when you put it next to the Nexus 7 or even the original Kindle Fire HD, it's noticeable how kind of squat it looks. So I don't think Apple going to the taller aspect ratio is actually going to be a big deal. I guess the question is whether that's a problem on the big iPad if they ever do change that one. Because
Yeah.
that one is it is weird, but again, maybe that's something you just get used to once it's been in the market long enough. You get kind of just used to the way it looks.
I played around with the new iPhone. One of the guys that works with me got one, and it's and it's crazy to say this, but
Yeah,
it felt really like the 4S feels really firm. I mean, it's this
yeah, it's
brick
metal.
in your hand, and it feels like I could take
It feels
this.
like old photography equipment to me. It's like metallic.
Yeah,
And it has slightly hard edges, and it feels substantial.
it does, and you kind of get this idea. We're like, okay, well, it's a well built device.
Yeah,
The new one is, that a lot of the bloggers said it feels hollow. It does feel hollow.
It almost feels too light.
It almost, yeah,
Which is
and
such a bizarre complaint.
and I guess
you know?
that's because we're not used to it by now, when we're going from
Yeah.
something that's a little heavier and picking that up. But it felt a little too light. The display is stunning. I mean, it's a great looking display, and I was playing around with the camera. I didn't notice that purple haze problem that it has.
Well, but apparently you have to take a shot right in direct sunlight or something.
I mean, isn't that a nutty problem? Did you hear the response?
I don't know. Yeah, I did. I mean, look. It's one of those things. It's kind of easy to kind of rip on Apple for this kind of stuff because, it's fun and it's easy. But the truth is, I'm in Colorado and I have my Lumia 900 with me, which is a great phone, but the camera kind of blows.
Yeah.
The more time I spend with it, the more I am aggravated by it. Not that it's horrible, because it's not really horrible. It's just not as good as it should be. And I take pictures outside in various light quality, and I took a picture when the sun was coming up in Boston when I was on the plane that is absolutely horrifically terrible. Pictures of the sun going down here in Colorado, same thing. It's like they're just unusable. They're terrible. So it's like, yeah, purple flaring. I kind of wish I had that problem.
Yeah.
I wish I could take an awesome picture that had purple flaring on it.
I'm gonna see if I took some pictures with my Nexus, my Galaxy Nexus. I was upstate New York over the weekend, and I took some nice pictures, and I wanted to see what they look like on the big screen. You tell me what you think.
I can't see it.
Oh yeah, you can't see it. Well, you know what? Let me show I'll show the audience then. I mean, and this is in perfect lighting.
Yeah.
And this is what it looks.
Well, that
like.
camera blows, by the way.
I mean,
the camera on that phone is terrible.
yeah. I mean, it's really bad. And when it came out, they were saying how it's going to be great, and it's the best Android camera, and it's
No, in
it's
fact, how
awful.
I describe this? The low end of the. I'm sorry, what?
I said it's awful.
Oh yeah, no, the low end of high-end phone cameras is that phone. That's the baseline. Like, to me, that's as bad as it can get on a really nice phone. And then right in the middle of the pack is the Lumia 900. It's like literally right in the middle.
It's just good enough.
It's good. It's the best you can say about it. It's fine. It's like, whatever. But I think above that are phones. Some phones I've used, some that I haven't. And so, my understanding of this market is like the Galaxy S3 is in there, the One X is in there. The iPhone 4S is absolutely right up near the top, and then the iPhone 5 is probably right at the top, I would guess. And we'll see again with the new phones coming out. We'll see what those cameras are. But I would say the world as it is today, I mean, that's the range, right? It's that phone you're talking about, and then the iPhone 5 is on the other side.
Total,
I think
total,
I think
yeah.
that's where we are. Yeah.
Well, the Galaxy, I've played around with the S3 camera, and it's not it's good,
But it's not
but
as good.
it's not nowhere near the iPhone 4S.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's a problem.
so
That's a problem.
it's a major problem, and I don't think they're going to figure it out. And I think
this new version of the One X has an improved camera, which I'm curious about. Obviously, the 8X that they're coming out with has what might be a great camera. The Lumia 920 has what appears to be a great camera.
but it's we talk about this every week, and it's almost like
I know. Never going to get off this till I find the camera.
But you know what? I know, and it irritates me because
I'm obsessed with it now.
I feel like it's almost like they sit down. They're like, okay, this is the iPhone. What can we do? Okay, the camera. Well, let's not worry about the camera because we won't come near that. And they just give up, and they're like, okay, we'll come almost near it. We'll try to come near it. But nobody ever made the initiative to kind of say, you know what, this camera is going to destroy the iPhone.
I honestly think that is exactly how these companies need to think right now. And they're ideally situated in the sense that Apple only releases a new camera basically once a year with their phone. So, come on, guys. I mean, seriously.
And you'll see Samsung release, multiple phones, but they're sharing the same components. That's what people don't understand. When you're buying the Galaxy and you're buying the whatever, a lot of the components are shared, and that's why they're able to turn out so many of them and do 6-month updates on these phones.
Yeah, I can't speak to the Samsung stuff. I would keep your eye on this new HTC One X, whatever it's called, One X Plus or whatever I can't think of the name of it, but those guys seem to care about optics and about improving the technology behind the cameras. And it wouldn't surprise me if that one was pretty good.
Yeah,
again, it's stupid. We have to have this conversation.
I know.
How could
it's
any
so
phone
silly.
come out after the iPhone and not be at least as good?
Well, the same discussion is how could any phone and any Android phone come out and not have the latest version of Android when it was released 8 months ago? I mean, I think that's also something to think about.
That's something you and I care about, and maybe the people listening to this care about. But I think the reason is because most people don't. My wife doesn't care. My wife has an Android phone. Has never occurred. She has no idea what version of Android it is, does not care. I think a lot of those people who buy those devices, remember, if you buy an HTC phone or a Samsung phone, it has something on top of it, in some HTC Sense or whatever. They fiddle with the UI anyway. So to a lot of people, whenever they buy these things, they're buying the thing because of what it looks like. They see the screen and like, yeah, that's the one I want. They're not really thinking, oh, this one has Android 2.3 or 2.4 or 2, whatever the versions are. They just buy the phone.
Yeah. We have a lot to get to today. Paul Allen made a couple comments about Windows 8. I wanted to talk to you about that.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on. I also want to run down the latest news and pretty much whatever is going to come out in the next 3 weeks, because it's gotten really confusing for me at this point because there's so much happening. But before we do, we need to talk about our sponsor, Audible.com. Great sponsor of the show, and Paul loves Audible. You use Audible all the time, so do I. My wife actually has gotten really hooked on Audible. If you go to audiblepodcast.com/Andrew, you can get your free audiobook, over 100,000 titles to choose from. And this week, Paul's Audible pick of the week is Zero Day.
Yes.
Tell us about this one.
So we had Mark Razinovich on Windows Weekly. Was it last week or the week before? I'm having trouble with time now. But recently, Mark Razinovich is a technical fellow at Microsoft. He's one of the smartest guys I've ever met. He's a guy that has reverse engineered the the Windows NT source code and understands how the kernel works and all that kind of stuff. And now he works at Microsoft. He did all that, before he worked at Microsoft. Just a really kind of a genius guy and a great guy too. He's just a good guy, and I've known him for years. But he is now writing novels. And it's weird because this Audible pick is actually I believe it's, let me look at it again. It is the second of the 2 books in this series, of a series that will eventually have many volumes apparently. And it's about a security expert who is involved with computer security and all that kind of stuff. And these books are sort of like they remind me of Michael Crichton books in a sense, in that they are extremely educational as well as being, exciting and interesting and very movie-like in pacing and so forth. And they involve a commingling of fiction with real-world events. So the first book had a lot to do with Al-Qaeda terrorists trying to attack the United States using viruses and other malware. And then in this book, it involves like Iran and China and Eastern Europe, and it's these real-world kind of like hacker threats that can threaten the security of the United States. And it's just this kind of fascinating, globe-trotting thriller type books. I guess cyber thriller is kind of a tough term, but
Techno thriller.
Yeah, I think it'd be fair to say. So if you're familiar with Daniel Juarez, for example, his books are very extreme in that he knows the science behind this stuff, so it's plausible within the context of course this is never going to happen. It's insane, but they're really out there.
But if it does, here's how it would happen.
If it does, the world's over. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But Mark Rozanovich's books are way more possible. Like these books are scary because you read about this and you're like, yeah, this is exactly what it's like out there. This could totally happen. So for example, the United States government and the Israeli government have been unofficially charged with that Stuxnet virus that has screwed up the Iranian nuclear program. Almost certainly that is exactly what happened. What if that technology was used against the United States? And so he has a lot of understanding about how governmental and military systems are secured and how could they be subverted, and potentially fairly easily, as it turns out. So it's kind of a, like a futuristic, well, not futuristic, it's present day.
Present day.
Again, commingling with real world events, but a very plausible, I keep wanting to call it future, but a very plausible alternate history, I guess.
It's scary to think that it could happen now. Cyber terrorism is something that's very real, and it's the possibilities of it happening. I mean, it does happen all the time, and
So what if it became something organized? What if it was? What if? Well, it is. I think it is. I think it is already fair to say that we are in fact essentially at war with Iran, but that we're doing it electronically through computers. This is a new thing. It's a very new type of thing. There's no real precedent for it.
I actually just bought it. I used my Audible for the month and got it. And you can get it too if you go to audiblepodcast.com/Andrew. I'm very selfish with my promo codes, guys. Just letting you know.
Say,
very, very selfish.
It actually, every time you do that, it triggers like a little ka-ching sound.
audiblepodcast.com/Andrew. Ka-ching. Get your free audiobook. And that was Paul's pick of the week. Audible pick of the week. Really cool pick. And
it's a neat one.
I'm gonna get this one. Last week we got a lot of comments about World War II books, and I'm going to use those the next couple of weeks as my pick. I'm going to start doing some more picks.
I got to tell you, so the book that I recommended last week, we're going to be dealing with this book for the next 6 months. This is like one of the longest books I've ever written. It's really long, and I've been going through it, but it's a long one.
So, Paul, let's talk about some of the upcoming releases that Microsoft is going to have the next, I guess, 3 weeks. We're going to have to get some more information on what's happening, some more information on the RT tablets, Windows Phone 8, and Windows 8 is going to be released. Is there anything that has developed over the last couple of days that we should be aware of?
That's changed?
Yeah. I'm very surprised at this, that we haven't gotten...
Yeah.
I mean, we've been speculating on the pricing.
And unfortunately, what happens as we speculate, this stuff kind of turns into a fever pitch. People still write me every single day, every day. Obviously, something about the Surface launch or whatever, or, that kind of thing. It's like, no, actually, no. And it is amazing that they're doing this. It's not so amazing that they can do it, but it's almost abusive. Like, I don't quite understand the point of it.
It's almost like the opposite of what Apple does. Apple, and it's been alleged that they do this, and the Apple blogs do this, is that they speculate all they want, a crazy amount. They leak images left and right.
Yeah.
There's this constantly, I mean, we know what the next Apple product is going to look 18 months prior to its release, while Microsoft has been extremely secretive about, certain details about their product.
You know what, though? Everyone has sort of made the point that Microsoft is sort of emulating the Apple secrecy model with the way they do things, which is an easy thing to say. I've said it.
Yeah, but Apple pretends to be secretive.
Yeah, but it's worse than that because when Apple announces something, it's coming out. And when Apple announces something, you got the message. For example, think about the way the iPhone 5 launch worked when they announced that product. We all sat, you and I did it live,
Yeah.
for a while, and people live blog it, and people discuss everything they said. But the other thing they discuss is what they don't say. And one of the things that came out during the iPhone launch, as it was happening, was they've never said anything about NFC, and here's the reason: it's not in there. That's how they communicate.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes they'll explicitly explain it. I seem to recall that last year when the iPhone 4S came out, they said, look, some people are coming out with LTE. We're looking at LTE, but the battery life is horrific. We just don't feel like that's a good experience. We're not going to do it now, but we'll do it in the future. And sometimes they don't. Sometimes, like with NFC, I actually think that Apple's explicit ignoring of NFC was a message that it doesn't mean they won't, put it in at a later date. But it does sort of suggest to me that maybe they won't, which is something I wouldn't have said.
We just don't care. It's not a priority of ours, and we're going to ignore it. Yeah, we're just going to ignore the entire thing.
All right, so that's Apple. But the problem with Microsoft is back in, when was it that they did the Surface announcement? June? July? It was June, right?
June. Early June.
Early June. Long time ago, right? June. It's July, August, September, October, 4 months ago. 4.5 months, almost 5 months before they launch one of the two products that they're announcing, Microsoft announces Surface. They give us some of the information. They don't let anyone touch an actual running, working piece of the hardware. No one can actually use one of these things.
Yeah.
To this day, no one outside of Microsoft has one of these things. They don't go anywhere outside of a very small group of people at Microsoft. They have never provided any more information about Surface, not once, not ever, about any aspect of it. They've never provided more information. They've just let questions and misinformation hang in the air.
I mean, even to the point that people speculate that the Surface is not a real device and it's just a name.
But the worst part of all this to me is if they had done this 30 days or less before the Surface shipped, it wouldn't matter. But that's not how Microsoft did it. They announced this thing 4.5 months before they were going to ship.
And I've always said that a lot of Apple's success rides on the fact that it's the hysteria of the event. Oh my God, I have to pre-order it. I have to go stand online. Oh my God, what am I going to do? I need it. And that's a real thing.
Yeah, the only time Apple didn't do this, to my memory, on a major product announcement was actually the original iPad. And in fact, not only was that the original iPad coming out some months, I believe, after the announcement, but they had to kind of push back parts of the release because remember it was going to be Wi-Fi at first, and then we're going to have the version with 3G and international availability, and some of the non-Wi-Fi stuff. It all got pushed back because they were. I think that was one where they kind of announced it because they had to early for whatever reason, and it's not the way they typically do things. So they have that one exception, But Microsoft, I think, by doing what they did and by doing what they've done since, has proven that they're not only are they not Apple, but if anyone who thinks that these guys are copying the Apple model, clearly these people have not gotten the memo because Microsoft has, to my mind, done a horrible job
at releasing this
product and releasing it. It's awful. It is awful for them to have done this.
I mean, what I don't understand is why did they feel that they needed to do it then and with no information given? And they did, by the way, they did the same exact thing with the phone stuff with Windows Phone 8, where they came out there and they said, don't even bother asking because we're not going to release every detail about this product. We're not going to give you a time frame. We're not going to give you pricing.
So the problem with so Windows Phone 8 being a completely different problem, I would say, they up until the day they made that initial announcement, the release schedule for Windows 8 actually fairly closely corresponded to the previous two versions, Windows 7X, where in 2010 in February they announced the first version. It was very exciting. They released some more information in April at their Mix conference. And then the product shipped in, actually November, but they had the launch event in October or early November. I don't remember, but 2 years ago, whatever. For Windows Phone 7.5, they had a launch event or like an announcement, I guess you'd call it, mid-year in New York,
Yeah.
and then they shipped that product again in November. This year, same thing. It was a little later in the year. It was July. I think the fact that it was in July, not in May, should have been an indication that this thing is they're trying to meet the schedule, but it's a little hard because let's face it, this is a major rewrite and a big deal, and it's a complete new version of the operating system and so forth. Honestly, though, up until that point, I was okay with everything they were doing with Windows Phone 8 because it was just kind of following along the lines of what they had done in the past. At least it was consistent. The problem was they made some promises. They said, this is only a tiny peek at the user experience and user stuff that's in the system. We will have more announcements about that stuff later.
Yeah.
And developers, we know you want to get going on this. Later in the summer, we're going to release an SDK, and you're going to get going on this. Now, later in the summer, I thought to myself, man, this will happen before the end of July or the end of August at the latest, And obviously, September kind of came and went. They had a really lame release for some people that they handpicked, and it was like, well, guys, seriously, what are you doing here? And of course, someone leaks a video that shows all the stuff, and what you basically find out is that at the end of the day, unless there's something in the SDK, something in Windows Phone 8 that's not in the SDK, we actually know all of the major end-user features that are in this thing. And what we have discovered, surprise, surprise, is that despite the fact that this thing under the covers is a major rewrite and a huge architectural change, from a user experience perspective, this thing is a very minor evolutionary update. It's just, as far as using it goes, I mean, aside from the fact that I can't put it on my existing phone, the difference between 7.5 and 8 is no greater than the difference between 7 and 7.5.
Well, how about 7, 8, and 8?
Or whatever. But you see what I'm saying? It's not a giant leap. You look at it and you're like, yeah, that's Windows Phone. I get it. There's nothing major happening there. Again, from a user experience perspective, a lot of little things. I'm just waiting for.
I mean, we're in October already. I'm just really surprised, and
I find it very irresponsible.
Yeah, I'm really surprised at the lack of information that's given out there, the lack of buzz that they're creating about it. I mean, they did months ago, but people forget.
I'm not a social engineering genius or anything like that, or an expert in sociology or whatever. But when you get people all excited to buy a product, I think one of the last things you want to do is make them wait for it, because that's when the questions start. And when you don't answer those questions, it gets worse. And when this thing finally does come out and it's maybe $100 more expensive than everyone thought it was going to be, or God forbid, $200 or $300 more expensive, this thing turns from one of the most eagerly awaited products of the year into thud. It's over.
It could be a great product, but it's just going to sit there. And, to kind of go back to the iPad, what are they going to do if 2 weeks prior to the release, Apple makes a big announcement? Okay, here's the iPad mini. It's $299, and you pre-order start now.
Yeah, sure.
There goes their launch. Because no matter what buzz you create around your product, and I'm not saying that the enthusiasts won't buy it, but whatever buzz you create around this Surface product that you're releasing will kind of be buried by Apple's,
Yeah.
coverage.
I mean, Windows Phone, the gadget blogs and the mainstream media will give it the moment that it deserves, and then that will be the end of it. The problem is this other stuff, the Android stuff and the Apple stuff especially, gets a constant media carpet bombing that Windows Phone is just never going to get. It's just not. And, these things all have big repercussions, and I just don't think – I'm just nervous that Windows Phone 8 is going to be like its predecessors, just ignored because everything else is just a much bigger deal, because they are, in the market. And then as far as Windows goes, I mean, obviously Windows 8 is weird. It's, it's got this new mobile operating system. It's got the desktop. It's kind of it's very strange. And then you throw Windows RT into the mix and it's like, okay, so it's basically the same thing, but it doesn't run the desktop apps you can download from the internet. What's going on here? Like it's a lot of confusion. And this is a time when Microsoft really needs to be clear.
And the Surface announcement to me was more of a product showcase rather than, okay, this is our product, pre-orders begin now. And what I would have done, this is what I would have done, Paul, if I ran Microsoft. Okay. Let's just play this hypothetical right now.
I dream of you running Microsoft. I think that would be fantastic.
It would involve what would my Microsoft have?
Right.
Little thought bubble, guys. Just take a still right now and just put it in and send me an email.
You would have like Windows iRock edition.
Windows
With
Z28.
like, yeah,
Windows A.
It's Windows reimagined.
Yeah.
With 8 cylinders.
with all 8 cylinder push rod edition.
Yeah.
None of that four valve crap. But what I would have done was, rather than displaying, Surface would have been one aspect of it, but I would have said, this is the future of the PC, not Windows, but the PC. And I would have highlighted all these hybrid devices where everything is dockable. And I would have gone out and said, this is what the PC is. Forget about the laptop. Forget about what you know. This is the laptop. This is the future of the PC. And I would have displayed all these beautiful and elegant, and I would have kept the partners happy. I would have displayed all these beautiful devices that are these hybrid, you pop them in, you put them out, and they're elegant, and they're signature devices. And I would have said, okay, this is what's coming when Windows 8 launches. No date yet for you. Goodbye. And everybody would have said, wow, they're changing the laptop. The laptop is gone. This is it.
Right.
But I think they have so much faith invested in these Ultrabooks, where I kind of felt that they would undermine the entire push behind Ultrabooks.
Well, I think the future of the Ultrabook is going to be Ultrabooks with touchscreens, which only makes some sense. And then what is essentially an Ultrabook, except that the screen comes off and that's a tablet, and that's fine. That's all fine. But, I've read this more than once now where some analyst has made this claim that there's great confusion at PC makers because they now have all these device types to deal with. In the past, it was kind of simple, right? We have high-end and low-end computers. We have desktops. We have laptops, Intel made this Ultrabook spec that they wanted to be more expensive than netbooks because those things were loss leaders, but less expensive than high-end computers. And of course, what PC makers have done by and large is price these things way more than they should be. The goal of the Ultrabook specification, if I remember correctly, was that these things should be $799 and less. Most Ultrabooks are $999. I mean,
$999,
they're expensive. $1,000 is expensive. I don't,
I mean, all you really need, honestly, all you need is 3 laptops. That's it. You have
but that's
the
thing.
ultra-thin mobile laptop. You have the hybrid convertible, dockable laptop. And then you have the lower-end, entry-level,
except that
whatever.
There's more than that, right? There's going to be – if you sell a tablet and it has a clippable base that turns it into sort of a clamshell laptop-y like machine, or maybe there's a dock and you can plug that into a desktop keyboard and a mouse and a monitor – or, maybe you just use it with a Bluetooth keyboard and mouse and whatever. And there's like these combinations. And then you have like these, like the Lenovo IdeaPad Yoga, which is kind of a flip around, kind of a weird take on the convertible PC. And you have laptops where the screen swivels around. It turns into like a thick laptop. All of a sudden you have this crazy combination of device types, right? And I've read now more than once. It's probably the same guy telling the same story and, to different people. But I've read more than once that within the PC makers and at Intel too, there's very big confusion in the market now because it's not clear what people are going to buy because people have never had these choices before.
But see, that's what they should have said. They should have said to all the critics that are like, well, I don't like the Metro. It's like a touch. It's like a tablet UI on my computer. I don't want that. And their response should have been, rethink the way computers are used.
Yeah.
Don't this concept, this archaic concept of this one device does this one thing is out the window. It does everything now.
See, the thing is that is what they did. I mean, but you can't dictate to these companies that they can't make what they want to make.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Dell and HP and Acer and Asus and whatever, these guys make what they make. I mean, they're used to making these things, and we get that there are new designs, but so I think part of the I keep talking about Windows RT as like the secret thing that's really going on here. That's their real goal, and it wouldn't surprise me to discover that the Windows ET hardware ecosystem is in fact locked down much more than the PC side is, specifically to avoid this very confusion. That ARM-based devices, I think we will see some renditions of even like desktop class computers and maybe even some very typical laptop-y looking things. But I think for the most part, they're going to be tablets. And they're going to be tablets that convert into laptops with a keyboard base or a dock. Or, or will work in the house that way. And I think that lack of too many choices, I'm not sure how else to say that, is in fact a good thing. It's the It's like when you go into a really high-end or a really large supermarket and they have 57 different kinds of Italian dressing. How do you how do you even choose?
How
Like
do
how
you
do you
choose?
know?
Yeah.
But if there are two, okay,
But do you
that's not
feel
hard.
that the OEMs at this point they're just throwing everything out there and they're like, okay, here's your 50
No,
options, and they're gonna just let
it's not
the
that any
market
one OEM
determine?
is doing it. It's that OEMs want to differentiate themselves from others, you know? So a company like Lenovo that makes the ThinkPad and IdeaPad lines, they will look at the market and say, okay, there's some things that we do really well. So let's push in this direction. And they may come out with some really weird device like that yoga thing that is a little quirky and different compared to what other companies are doing. And that's important for them because it establishes an identity that is uniquely theirs. But it also ultimately adds to the confusion in the marketplace because there's no other device that's exactly like that.
Yeah.
And is this any better than doing it this way or this other way? A year from now we'll have a better picture of that. But in the meantime, I think it is possible that consumers are going to have that deer in the headlamps look when they go into Best Buy. And I've talked about this effect that Windows 8 may have, where people see all these start screens and they're like, "Oh, this is really nice." That's
Yeah.
for tablets. But what if there's like 17 different device types,
Yeah.
and it's like, I don't know. How do you pick?
I know that they have some sort of guidelines that they've set for the OEMs to follow, but
Yeah,
I mean, is the future of this company to have stricter guidelines for the OEMs to follow so they kind of have this uniformed
yeah. I mean, on the PC side,
experience?
Microsoft has always wanted to do more restrictions
And I
on
think
what
they
PC
should.
makers do. No, but they can't.
I know.
You got to remember, this is a partnership and a relationship. This is not Microsoft dictating, what has to happen. It's they just never been able to do it. The other thing to remember is that, Microsoft has been basically begging these guys across several Windows versions now to not put crapper on there, to clean this up, to do this, and not to replace stuff with their own stupid utilities and not to put duplicate. They have these examples of computers that have like three different networking utilities over and above what's
Yeah.
already built into Windows, and
Yeah,
it's
and
like,
their response is, well, we have to subsidize the cost somewhere, Microsoft.
yeah. So, but the other thing they did was because of all that, they said, okay, what we'll do is we'll do it right, and we'll use their hardware, and we'll show them how we can do it right, and maybe then they'll jump on board. They do the signature program. So before Microsoft ever decided they were going to make their own hardware, they basically took the partner hardware and made them better and said, look, here's a signature image. Look at this thing. Instead of taking 44 seconds to boot into Windows 7, it takes 17 seconds. And instead of having all this crapper on here, it's got no crapper and it runs really fast. And they're like, yeah, that's cute. We're not doing that. Not a single PC maker ever, a major PC maker has ever signed up to ship Microsoft signature images on their computers.
Yeah, they
And
don't
it's
want
not
that.
something they would have charged for, you know?
Yeah.
It's just something they wanted to get out into the world so that, people liked PCs better.
Well, how is Best Buy
Better.
going to make that $20 for me to wipe everything off then, Paul?
Yeah.
They charge you $20 to wipe everything off.
Sure.
It's
Which,
amazing.
by the way, no, but the fact that they can make a business out of that
Yeah.
it highlights exactly what's wrong with this industry. So I think that I don't know this. I'm guessing in a way that I think that Windows RT is going to be locked down a little bit more. That there have been stories where PC makers wanted to make RT devices, and Microsoft said, no, we're not letting you do it. You don't have enough experience in this market. You make PCs. You've never made an ARM-based device. These things have to perform within certain ranges, performance, battery life, reliability, and so forth. I think they're being very strict about it. I think it's smart because the consumers are going to have a better experience overall, aside from the fact that, obviously it doesn't run Windows desktop applications, than they will with like an Intel compatible PC.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason why I really do think that to truly judge whether Windows 8 is successful or not is whether Windows RT takes off.
And I think that's determined by the price. I think that's
In part, yeah.
But see, here's the thing. I mean, if it wasn't price, what are you comparing it to? You're comparing it to the iPad, and it's a far
Well,
better looking device than the iPad.
all right. So better. Well, okay.
I'm talking about the UI. Let's talk about
Yeah.
the Windows
Yeah.
RT in general. I think it looks a lot prettier.
So if you have a Windows RT device that is as light and thin as an iPad, the same size, that has a reasonable screen resolution. I mean, you're probably not going to see the exact Retina display resolution, but an HD display resolution. It runs Windows RT instead of iOS. How much do you charge for something like that? My argument is that it has to, at the worst, it has to cost the same. That should be the worst. It should be less, I think, because this is a new product and you're asking people to take a chance. The iPad has an established ecosystem.
Yeah.
People get it. Even people who don't really understand what they're buying are walking into a store thinking they're going to get an iPad because that's what they see advertisements for everywhere. Apple markets these things in every waking moment of your day, in subways and billboards, on TV, everywhere. They're really
Yes,
good at it.
it's kind of become the standard.
Yes, it's kind of become the ad. It's
Yeah.
just everything that's advertised, from what I can tell. So, when you're fighting that kind of competitor, you can't just meet it. You have to beat it. I mean, and that was sort of like the conversation we had earlier about these tablets. If you're not going to, or I'm sorry, about the phones on cameras. If you're not going to beat what's already out there, what are you coming to market for?
You know what I was going to ask you, and this kind of came to mind. Another aspect of the success of Windows 8 and Windows RT tablets and the Surface, it really lies on the salesperson. What is Microsoft doing to kind of re-educate the guys at Best Buy and all these other stores on how to sell this and what exactly it is?
Yeah, well, so this has been an issue throughout the life cycle of Windows Phone, right? That
Yeah.
Microsoft's partners to go to market with these various phones, and you walk into an AT&T or Verizon store or whatever, and the guy would steer you away from that phone. He would steer you toward an Android phone or an iPhone. And so there are certain rules that this little kind of weird market works within, and there are these notions of subsidies and promotions and so forth that you can do for the employees and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, I don't really, it's kind of a tough thing to say. I don't really care about that so much as I think it's more important, and I think, people who care about technology or care about this stuff would agree that what this is about is the products themselves and how good they are. Like I would like to think in a perfect world that something like Windows Phone could sell itself because I happen to believe it's better than the other stuff that's out there. But the truth is, me saying something like Windows Phone, by which I mean the operating system, is better than iOS is like, A, my opinion, and B, doesn't really matter because that's not why people buy these things. Someone could listen to my arguments about why Windows 7 is better than iOS, nod their head, and then turn around and buy an iPhone 5 because the reason they're buying this device isn't for iOS. It's got that app selection is a big thing for people. It's got this ecosystem support, which is unparalleled. It's kind of a no-brainer when you think about it. And that's the thing. I mean, when you're fighting these products, you have to come into the market with something that is at least as good. I mean, that's got to be the baseline. I don't understand how you could, with any credibility, do otherwise.
Yeah.
So hopefully these Windows RT tablets are better, but hopefully they're also cheaper.
You know what I was going to ask you? What's the maximum screen real estate that a Windows Phone 8 could have?
I think it's
Because I read
5 inches. I think is the biggest. And I believe that the smallest that Windows 8 can have is 7.
Windows 8 could have is 7, and that's 5. Okay, so that's the separation between them. Because I was reading somewhere where I had the article early in the week, and I forgot where it was, where I put it, but I was reading that there's going to be a 5.5-inch Windows Phone, tablet phone.
Yeah,
Which it gets a little funny there.
right. I've always thought that Microsoft should allow its partners to sell a version of Windows Phone that is not a phone. It's a little awkward because it's called Windows Phone 8. But and I don't really. It's not that I feel like it would sell all that well. If you think about the Android market, there are actually several Samsung devices that run iOS that are basically like MP3 players, like the iPad, where you can use it as a music and media player. You can run the apps, obviously, in the games, and I think that's the big part. I don't think those devices sell well at all. I suspect if you were to compare sales of those with the iPod Touch, it would be 99-1 or something. I'm sure it's a horrific differential in sales. But I still feel like it's just important to have that because it does provide a way for people to give a device to their kids, let them share the account. Hopefully it has parental controls in there like they're having in Windows Phone 8. You can get access to you buy an app, it works on all the devices, and you can get people kind of going in that ecosystem. And it's hard to put a dollar value on that because even if they don't sell particularly well, it's still a way to get those things out into the world and get them into the hands of people who might be potential customers in the future.
Sure. I want to touch on the comments that Paul Allen made about Windows 8. But before we do that, I want to talk about our other sponsor, and that's Win Connections.
Oh, I
Paul's
should
going to
have
be.
had someone over here from Wind Connections.
I know you should have. You're right there actually.
I'm feet away from them.
Yeah, you're feet away from them. October 29th to November 1st at the Bellagio in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Paul's going to be speaking there. Mary Jo will be speaking as well.
Right.
You're going to be on a panel. Have you decided what exactly you're talking about? I've asked you
Yes.
this for the last 3 weeks.
It's a little bit of a secret, but I mean,
Yeah.
it's basically just we're positioning it as we're going to tell you the stuff about Windows 8 and Windows Phone 8 and Office 2013 and Windows Server, even that Microsoft can't really or doesn't really necessarily speak honestly about or openly about, and just have an open and honest conversation about what's really going on here. I think in the IT pro world, especially, people are very confused. And I guess the key takeaway is that looking at Windows 8 specifically, Microsoft has always tried to straddle a line, I think, between the enterprise and consumers. And in this version, it's pretty much for consumers, and that's okay because it doesn't matter what they did for the enterprise in this version. No one was going to upgrade anyway.
Yeah.
They're all doing Windows 7 or will be soon, and they're going to skip this version. So this was actually good timing for Microsoft to do this. But, the ramifications of that are interesting because, Windows 8 has a lot of technologies in it, which I think are going to form the future of its products going forward. And I think it's important to understand what's going on there. So, we're going to talk about that and just have a conversation basically with the people in the audience about what their fears and questions and concerns are and all that kind of stuff. So should be good.
Yeah, and if you're an IT pro or a developer, this is the year that you want to be there because there's going to be a lot of questions and a lot of answers.
Like a self-help
for
group. We'll have a psychiatrist on hand.
Yeah.
Take people into a side room and
you
it'll be okay.
You could learn about optimizing
through this
Hyper-V and Windows Server 2012
Yes.
and everything you could imagine.
Actually, all that stuff is there too. I
Everything.
should say there's more going on at Connections than us, but I mean that's what we're doing.
October 29th to November 1st at the Bellagio in Las Vegas. If you go and sign up and use promo code TECH100 when registering, you save $100, which is great. You can get more information at winconnections.com. And I'm excited. I'm really curious to see what people come back with from Win Connections this year because I think it's a very exciting year to go with all the happenings this year with Microsoft. So let's touch on Paul Allen a little bit.
Yep.
Very interesting comments made by him about Windows 8. I'm just trying to find the article here while we're talking. Pretty much every blog covered it, but I have a TechCrunch article here about it, and he likes it. And then he said, and he was quoted to say, "I did encounter some puzzling aspects to Windows 8."
Yeah. I found his comments to be more realistic and real world than what Bill Gates said, which wasn't much at all for whatever that's worth.
And surprisingly, it's very close to what people have been complaining about. The things that he finds puzzling, like the difficulties of multiple screens. A lot of people have been screaming about, it doesn't work right, and you can't pull up the little start screen, the little display thing for the start screen if you have multiple screens.
Yep.
Difficult to scroll in desktop view on a tablet. No clock on the start screen, which I didn't really complain about that. On-screen keyboard doesn't appear automatically in desktop view. What do you make of this?
No, he's right. He's right. And
you agree with him?
I actually agree with everything he says. There's nothing unreasonable in that. Windows 8 is, it's going to be a transition. Microsoft had written something in a blog post one time where they said, and this is true, they did this, in Windows 95, the concept of a start button was so kind of weird and curious. They actually had like this little animation where an arrow would slide over from the right and say, click here to begin or whatever.
I remember that, yeah.
And this is like that, except times 100, right? I mean, the weirdness of Windows 8, and I ran into this as I was trying to get the network working, is that there's a combination of these two UIs that are both completely different and have completely different focuses, right? Metro is very much a touch-first interface, as Microsoft calls it. It was designed primarily for touch. Now, it has been retrofitted, if that's the right word, with interfaces that make it workable with keyboard and mouse and with other interfaces. But, it's really designed for touch. And if you're going to upgrade an existing computer, you buy a regular computer, like a non-touch type computer. Some of the stuff that's there is going to be a little weird. And even for people who live exclusively on the desktop, you're not really doing that because, You have to deal with the start menu. You have to deal with start search. You have to deal with the charms. The system-wide controls are all Metroified. The system notifications are all Metro. It kind of creeps in, and there's no way around it. There's no way to turn it off. If anyone thinks that someone is ever going to write a utility that will turn off every single Metro feature in Windows 8, I really don't believe that that's possible because it's just too deeply ingrained. And so there's going to be this weird transition where we have to get used to it. But the only thing I can tell you is I've been using Windows 8 exclusively since, I think, last November. And you do get used to it. Now, it didn't take me like November until yesterday. I mean, I obviously got used to it pretty quickly. But
because you've been using it for almost a year, do you feel like Windows 7 is dated for you now?
Yeah, I can't use Windows 7 anymore. And by the way, that's not a bad way to judge an upgrade, right? When you're upgrading any software or hardware, whatever. If you go back to the old version and it feels old-fashioned and inefficient in some ways, then the new one's a good upgrade. Windows 8 includes some very key technologies even for desktop users that I think are very important, that I think people are going to like a lot. But yeah, the Metro stuff is weird. That's what I'm sorry, I beat this to death, but that's what he's basically saying. Sometimes you click on something and the screen that comes up doesn't seem right.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'll tell you, I've been reviving an old compact Passaria from 1999.
Oh, nice.
And I have Windows XP on it because it was in use till about 2001, 2002. But just to do, normal tasks, and I finally gave up because it was dying, but Windows XP does feel dated.
Yeah,
I can't.
XP does.
And some people still are hanging on for dear life, so they're gonna
XP and the first version of Home Server, which was based on the server version of XP, lack start menu search. And so one of the things, when I have to go back to XP for whatever reason, which these days basically amounts to installing XP so I can upgrade it to something else, as you tool around in it, you run into these inefficiencies that are created because it just doesn't have features that are present in newer versions.
So the long-awaited conversation about the Wii is coming up.
We have I got to say, I'm a little confused by why this is so interesting.
I'll tell you why it's interesting. I had a point I was going to make a couple weeks ago, and I totally forgot that point.
Yes.
And it was it was like an aha moment for me, and I've totally forgotten the point I was going to make. And I'm going to try to articulate it as well as I can because I'm just piecing thoughts together at this point. And this is why I find it very interesting. They have a head start over Microsoft and Sony at this point.
I don't know though.
They have a 1 year. They have a 1 year leap ahead of them.
Well, Microsoft had a 1 year leap over the previous generation. That didn't necessarily work to their favor.
Yeah.
Plus, this thing is not technologically more advanced than anything that's already on the market, which I think is a problem.
No, but they are doing something interesting, and they have the backing of the cable companies.
Yeah.
And they're going to have full integration in the Wii with the cable service. So and until we play around with it, I mean, I don't know if they're going to have the same type of integration like Google TV does, because if they do, I think that's a huge plus in their corner.
So I'm not going to write that off. I mean, obviously, this is something I want to look at and think about. But, one of the reasons that the music industry worked with Apple early on was because iTunes at the time was only on the Mac. And it was something they could do easily as an experiment just to kind of see how it went. Obviously, they then took iTunes to Windows, and it took off, and iTunes is now this dominant force in the industry. I think there are a lot of people in the music industry who are like, I kind of wish we had, maybe fostered some competition there a little bit better, and we didn't have to kind of deal with the whole Apple big thing. And I think that the TV industry, I guess, or whoever this is, the cable industry, has the same feeling about the Wii, that this thing is not going to be a huge, massive success for them. You got to remember that they've released a couple of handhelds late in the past couple of years that no one has bought, really, that has not set the world on fire. And that interest in the original Wii dropped off the face of the earth a couple of years
ago. It plummeted, yeah.
Yeah, it just died. It was like the biggest thing in the world for a couple of years, and then it was just non-existent. And there's a pretty decent chance that this thing tanks, and if it does, the future of that company becomes very different than what it might have been otherwise.
Well, I think why it also tanked. It's because it was not high def, which was a huge, huge disappointment in that device.
Yep.
that they didn't have HD support, and it kind of looked old and dated by the time everybody got an HD TV. You know, when this thing came out, it was still kind of normal not to have an HD TV for some people. You're putting in your kid's room most of the time, and your kid didn't have a flat screen HD TV, so it didn't matter. But now in 2012,
You know, I wish there was this thing I could just point to and say this is it. You know, and this is probably true of a lot of markets. If you look at the living room specifically, though, I think Microsoft's integrated approach is the best, with one huge caveat, which I'll get to in a moment. But the point behind there is that you can get virtually any online service of any kind through the Xbox 360, right? The big ones. And it's just a great all-in-one kind of media box now because of that. The huge caveat is that you have to pay like $60 a year for Xbox Live Gold, which is like just, I mean, so unbelievably stupid, I think, and limiting. And so because of that, I think a lot of people look at these alternatives, and there are some inexpensive ones like the Roku boxes, which are great for what they are, the Apple TV, which is great too for what it is. None of these offers that full, you know, suite of integrated experiences like you get on the 360, but you know, all of them have Netflix, and I think that's, you know, frankly, 75% of what people are looking for. None of them offer, in a mainstream, really well deployed sense, any kind of cable TV interoperability, right? Like,
but I'll tell you, Paul, it sounds crazy, but I have a Roku and I have a Google TV, and I use my sluggish, you know, first gen Google TV because it's fully integrated in my television.
Yeah.
Not in, but the device actually, you know, it works. It piggybacks off of your cable thing, and I think that's going to be a huge selling point for all the soccer moms that buy this, and all the people that want to lose weight on this thing, and all the kids. You don't have to go to Input 2 to kind of get it to work.
Sure, absolutely. Having one device that does it all is excellent. But the thing is, I don't know. I just don't think I don't know if it's going to be good enough. We have all these devices. I have a Roku, an Apple TV. We have a Google TV, but I'm not using it for Google TV. But it's not in the living room, so whatever. But an Xbox 360 as well. And you know, the device that gets used the most in my living room, frankly, is the cable TV set-top box.
Yeah.
But when my wife wants to work out in the morning, or we're going to watch Netflix or whatever, we kind of alternate between the 360 and the Roku device, and sometimes the Apple TV too. You know, we rent movies on there occasionally.
Now, let me ask you: does your wife go and turn on the 360 and you know, watch Netflix on there?
Yeah.
Does she find it to be like a burden, like the entire process?
My wife finds all technology to be a burden. I think she is always waiting for something to go wrong.
Yeah.
I think she's got this idea in the back of her head that eventually it's just going to stop working because it kind of always does, and I think that's part of the problem. So, Nintendo doesn't exactly have a rich history of working with the cable companies, so I'm kind of curious, like, how this is all going to work.
I am too, and you know, the other selling point I think to this thing is the cost. For $299 and $349, you're getting you know, the latest version of whatever, and you're getting that handheld device, which is their gimmick. I mean, that's their selling point, not the Wii, but that's what's going to sell this thing. It's that handheld device.
Maybe.
And I'll tell you, I looked at a lot of like the demos of it, and it has the same problem that every other tablet does that's not an iPad. It's really slow, and it's not really well made, and people are not going to like that. They're not going to understand that because every smartphone is instantaneous. You know, even the Android tablets now are instantaneous. When you swipe. And on this thing, when I saw the video, when you're swiping it, it's like this 2 frame a second screen going across.
Right.
And that's not going to work.
No, it's not going to, no.
And that's what I fear now with this thing. 2 weeks ago, I hadn't looked at those videos, but now I'm looking at it, and I'm thinking, you know, we become a society that's so used to it just swiping and it working. So if I'm doing this, oh, that's an email. If I'm doing this, it's going to go and it's going to change screens.
Right.
But I don't want to see, you know, slow down every time I try to switch my screen on this device. Mm-hmm. So that may affect it. I don't know. But they have the potential. I mean, they have a major potential of becoming dominant. I think people are going to buy it, but are they going to continue using it? That's the question.
Yeah, I mean, if the original Wii is any indication, no. You know, but we'll see. I mean, obviously, if this thing integrates with your cable and it works, they're going to be using it if just for that. So I don't know. I don't feel any huge measure of excitement about this product.
Are you going to get it?
I don't know. I honestly, I don't know. You know what this reminds me of is the I keep forgetting the name of it. The new PSP that came out this summer.
Oh, the Vita.
The Vita. So the PS Vita, I have been waiting 8, 10 years, I don't know, for a handheld video game machine that could actually play first-person shooters because it would have the two, hat-type controllers, which allow you to move and look at the same time. The original PSP only had one, so it was kind of ponderous. This device has it, and there are shooters available. In fact, there's a Call of Duty game coming out for this this little handheld sometime this fall. It's interesting, but the thing is, like, after waiting for it for so long, it never happened. And then I thought, well, it was the type of thing, like, I sort of always thought I was going to do it, and then I don't know. I just didn't pull the trigger. I just felt like I'd never use it. And this new Wii U thing kind of falls into that same category where I just don't.
But you have Mario.
I'm not feeling it. I don't know how else to say it. I don't know.
See, but I guess it's a generational thing because I'm like, oh, a new Mario game, I got to get it. I'm like, oh, Zelda, I got to get it.
Yeah.
And I'll probably play it for a little bit, and I'll put it aside. But I'm definitely going to get it. But the problem with the Vita was that it's a really good device.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it is.
I mean, it looks great. It feels great. But just it's Sony's marketing, and I don't think you could compete in that market right now.
I don't know. I've got all these devices. I've got every tablet imaginable. I've got several phones. I don't really play a lot of games on these things at all. I mean, really, almost never.
Start selling it off, Paul. Make like a little online store.
Yeah, no, but that's not the point. I mean, the point is just that what I don't need is another device that can play video on a plane or something, right? So that device's ability to do stuff like that is completely uninteresting to me. And so what it really boils down to is just video games. And I don't know, maybe I'm just getting old or whatever, but I don't have a lot of time for video gaming on the go, I guess. Like I'm not gonna. And if I was sitting on a plane and I had nothing to do and I didn't have enough room to work, I guess, probably read a book, maybe watch a movie.
But you play first person shooters exclusively, right? You're not doing like side scrollers.
Almost exclusively, yeah, on the 360, yeah.
Yeah. See, I can't play those. I'm awful at them. Like I'm really bad at them.
Okay, but I mean, obviously in the PlayStation world, there are games that are excellent and are available only in that place, and some of those are on the Vita, and there's some interest there. Uncharted, for example, is one of those game series you don't get to play if you're not on a PS3 these days. I'm curious about them. But again, I think it just comes down to time and interest, and with the Vita stuff, I'm just not feeling it.
So what I'm guessing is the Wii U's coming out. Then the following year, 2013, it's going to be the Xbox, whatever.
Yeah.
And the following year, it's going to be Sony.
Right. So, obviously, any next generation Xbox, and there's some notion that there might be multiple versions of this thing, is really interesting. And I think by definition, something that Sony would do in the living room next time around is also very interesting because they obviously had very high-end hardware this time around. It's Sony, so they have all these media connections and so forth. And it's, I could see them kind of pulling off something decent this next time around. But I really fear for Nintendo because as well as they did that previous or current generation, I just feel like they're so far behind.
Yeah.
In the things that matter, and that they almost become like a toy maker,
That's almost like what it is. Yeah, it's a gimmicky thing.
Video games for little kids,
They may have a market
drunk
with that.
adults or something. I don't know. It just seems.
I mean, that pretty much sums up their entire market share, Paul. Drunk adults and children. Somebody brought up an interesting fact. I was reading an article about what Sony could potentially do to kind of gain this dominance again. Mm-hmm. They could fully integrate PlayStation in every single one of their TVs.
Sure.
And now they're going to sell Sony TVs and say, if you're buying one of the higher end Bravios or whatever, comes with Sony, comes with PlayStation.
They should do that, by the way. The only issue, though, is Sony's TV business is not doing very well either. Obviously, they have some more endemic issues that they need to address that kind of go beyond the video game world. But yeah, I think integrating across all of the stuff you do is really important. You see Microsoft does it, Apple does it really well. Sony should be doing that. The problem with Sony is that to date they have treated their different business units as very discrete business units that don't really have a lot of cross-pollination, which has obviously been a mistake. So maybe they'll figure it out.
And that was our segment on the Wii U.
But what was the
So-
point, though? Do you remember what was the point that
I-
you had you wanted to make a few weeks ago?
Paul, I wish I knew because
Oh, you don't know.
it just a light came on and I said, oh my god, this is I figured it out.
Wii
I
U
know
is the future. I've got it.
I got it, and
Like a safe fell in your head or something.
I don't know, something fell on my head because I totally forgot what the point was I was trying to make, and I've been stalling for 2 weeks. I wish I knew. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna make myself a couple more dirty martinis tonight, and I'm gonna sit down. I'm gonna think about it. And I'm just gonna get drunk thinking about what the Wii could do, and who knows? Maybe 3 o'clock in the morning it'll come on
text
here.
me if you figure it out. I'm curious.
Yeah, it had something to do with integrating with the TV. I cannot remember it.
Right.
Cannot remember for the life of me what it is. It's been bothering me.
I'm always looking for an excuse to spend money I don't have. So, let me know.
Me too. All right. Time to go. Go to our website, guysfromqueens.com, guys. We had a late start, but we kept it going and turned out to be a decent show. So next week, we're going to be talking more about Windows Phone, I'm sure, with more details hopefully coming out within
Next week, I'll be in a green room instead of an orange. and
Are you?
yellow.
Where are you going to be?
No, I'm going to be home, I think.
Oh, okay. Blue room.
Blue room.
Thurrott Blue, as they've coined it. You can go to winsuperside.com for all things Paul Thurrott. Also, Paul does another podcast, a great podcast, Windows Weekly on the Twit Network, every Thursday at 2 p.m. East. If you miss any portion of this show, you can catch it on our website, gfknetwork.com. You could also watch it on winsuperside.com. Paul posts it as soon as I send him the file. Also, you can follow me on Twitter, Andrew Zarian on Twitter. @Thurrott is Paul's Twitter handle. And that's it. We're done. We're finished. We made it. We'll see y'all next week on What the Tech. Good night, everybody.